Alrighty. So, Joe Budden and Ish are fighting over a contract, and I think it's really hilarious, so I decided to make a video about it because the way that Joe Budden argues really annoys me quite a bit, right? So I decided to make a video about Joe Budden and Ish arguing, and because the way Ish does not Ish, but the way Joe does business does bother me quite a bit, right? I don't like the way that he argues or any of those things, right? I just don't feel like it's fair, and I feel like he uses volume to try to get his point across when in actuality he's very wrong. He realized he's wrong halfway through the conversation, but it's too late and lets his pride get in the way. Okay? So, if you guys don't know, Joe Budden is a American rap hip-hop star. Do it like how I hear other people do it. American rap hip-hop star. Most famous for his song, Pump It Up. And smoking. He's also really famous for smoking. If you ever want to read something funny or just a really nice roast, go ahead and stop by the Fitz page, Joe Budden Fitz. This guy has nothing else better to do with his time but to roast Joe Budden. So I thought it'd be really funny to just open up with, oh wait, you guys can't see none of that, can you? Whoopsie. There we go. I think it's really funny. I thought it would be really funny to really open up with like the worst photo of Joe I could find. He has really bad fashion sense, but that's fine. It's okay to be bad at fashion when you got enough money, right? So in this video here, the Patreon exclusive Hakuna Matata Part 1 Joe Budden podcast, Ish and Joe are arguing about the contract. Ish, or we call him Uncle Pod, right? Because of his old man ways and using spanky for the word money, right? Ish here, Joe wants Ish to sign a contract. But in the contract, Joe states that he should be able to fire Ish at any time, but Ish cannot quit when he wants, right? And what they argue about here in the video is that Ish wants to be able to quit. If Joe could fire Ish, he wants to be able to quit when he wants to, right? So that's the big argument here. And you can listen to the way Joe explains it.
Please divulge it to me.
I will.
But from my understanding, Ish's lawyer is spending weeks trying to come up with an I quit clause, which enables him to be able to just quit whenever he feels like it.
So Ish's lawyer wants Ish to have a I quit clause in his contract so he could quit whenever he wants, just like Joe explained, right? And the reason that that's there is because Joe refuses to have a contract where Ish could quit. Well, Joe refuses to take out the part where he could fire Ish at any point, right? So all Joe would have to do if he really didn't want to be difficult is be like, all right, you can work for 2 years and I can't fire you until the end of your contract, right? They're best friends. Joe mentions it a few times through the podcast. Hey, we're good friends. There's no way I'm just going to up and fire you. So where Ish replies, then sign the contract. Then put it in the contract, right? And I think it's just a really smart business move. If I'm going to work for you, I don't want you to be able to fire me whenever you want, but I can't quit when I want. It should be equal. 1-1. If you're going to fire me, I should be able to quit, right?
No! No! What about that makes sense? Somebody has to explain it to me.
Just let me know when it's my go.
Please.
I don't know how YouTube works, so I'm not gonna let the clip run for too long. I'll be honest with you. It's my first time trying to make real YouTube videos, but whatnot. But that's basically it. And then halfway through the video, well, not halfway through the video, I think towards the end here, they get into a yelling bout about the contract, but everyone backs up Ish. No one's in the room is on Joe's side. I think Joe is going a little bit crazy here, and we can all understand if you've watched JBP. Ish and Ice is not the first people to be on the podcast. Joe had 2 other hosts before. Their names were Rory and Mal. Now, Rory and Mal has been on the podcast for a long time. I think they started the podcast with Joe. I wasn't there from day one, but I believe they was with Joe from the beginning of the podcast, right? And what happened is that Rory and Mal got into a big fight with Joe over the contract, where Joe just would not tell them the numbers, would not show them the paperwork. At least that's what they allude to through this whole scuffle, is that they will not. Joe refuses to show them the paperwork, and that Joe's stealing money from them, right? So what the boys did is that they quit the podcast. Right after the Spotify deal, they quit, they left. They had a big deal with Spotify, is a big thing. They quit, they left, and they did their own spinoff, Rory and Mal, which I appreciate both shows. It just depends on what I'm looking for that day, depends on who I'm listening to, right? Rory and Mal's podcast tends to be about hour and a half. You know, you can see here about hour and a half to about an hour. So if I want a really long podcast, I'll listen to Joe. If I want a more upbeat, funny podcast, I'll listen to Rory and Mal. And I like both. I like the perspectives I get from both ends. But these two guys here, they left the podcast because they believe Joe was stealing from them, which is fine. If you think someone's stealing from you and they don't want to prove that they're not stealing from you, then maybe they were stealing from you, right? So they started their own podcast. They got 252 subscribers on YouTube. They're doing really good on their other DSPs. So they're doing good. The boys are fine by themselves right now. They're having fun. I enjoy it. You know, everybody enjoys it. I haven't seen too much backlash. But every now and then, you will get where they throw shots at each other. It's usually Mal. Mal will throw shots at Joe. Joe will throw shots back at that Mal and Rory. But that's pretty much the long and skinny of it. Let's see.
Level rate. Does UPS fucking pay what Joe pays? Stop with these fucking semantic games.
Yo, dog.
Do you see what I mean? He just starts yelling because he's frustrated. He has his back against the wall, and that's the worst part about the podcast, right? He makes good content. I likes when he's funny. He's lighthearted. He asks some questions that has nothing to do with anything, and I think that's hilarious sometimes, right? But when he starts getting into this bag,
answer is no.
You're the one doing
the
semantics.
The answer is no.
He changed it to entry level. My point is this.
Fam, nobody that's paying.
When he starts getting into his yelling bag, I never enjoy the podcast. It just makes me want to turn it off. I'm not trying to listen to a grown man, 40 years old, who's rich, because he's rich. The man has money. I'm not going to say that he doesn't have money. He's really rich. He's doing really well for himself, right? And I'm happy for him. I'm not mad at him for it, but that's one part of the podcast I do not enjoy at all. I don't like the yelling, right? But that's pretty much what I just made the video on. Is just to touch on this debacle that they're having here about arguing over a contract. I understand where Joe's coming from. His last two hosts, which were big parts of the podcast, left him high and dry. He had to go grab Ish and Ice to hurry up and replace them to keep keep the show going. So he doesn't want anyone to quit. But also, if you're not going to let your employees, if you're going to have your employees sign a contract to work with you, then both parties should respect the duration of the contract. So it shouldn't be a problem for Joe to put in, all right, I cannot fire you until the end of this contract. We will discuss your employment after the end of the contract before renewing another one, right? I believe that's how things should be done. But it seems like in later videos they seem to be made up a little bit. They still refer back to the contract every now and then, but I think they're doing pretty well as a group. I don't think it's really caused too much problems between them, right? If anyone really has a problem in the group, it'll be Ice being called Icy Poo. Is it Icy Poo? Yeah, Icy Poo. I think that might be the biggest problem with the show. But the way Joe does business, he's self-destructive. We all know that Joe is self-destructive. But I really hope that he's tries to keep the podcast rolling, because who else is going to get me through hours and hours and hours of playing Civilization? So those are my final thoughts. If you guys got anything you want to let me know, just leave it in the comment section below. Like and subscribe. Peace.